I saw these beautiful clay beads on the Pure Salt website and knew I could recreate them for way less than $238. I decided to use air dry clay here, and I had a little bit left of my paper clay. I get this from Michael's. It's around $12, and depending on the size project you're making, you can usually make quite a few things. I haven't loved working with air dry clay in the past and prefer polymer clay, but I realized I needed to add water to the air dry clay while working with it. That helps to keep it from drying out too quickly and fill in any of the cracks that start to appear. To make the beads, I'm taking small quarter-size pieces and rolling them into a ball, adding water to the surface to smooth it out, and then smushing the circles down a bit to create a more stone-like shape. I wanted the beads to be very organic looking and not all identical, so there was no rhyme or reason to how I shaped them. I ran out of my paper clay and only had about half of the beads that I wanted, but before I go get more clay, I need to put a hole into the center for where we're going to string them up. I'm using this clay tool, but anything would work here to just add a hole. I wanted to compare another brand of air dry clay, so I picked up this pack of DAS to finish the beads. I really like the feel of this one over the paper clay, and the color is much whiter. I know my paper clay was a little bit older and dried out by the time I got to the end of the package, but taking that out of the equation, both clays dried in the same amount of time, they both shrunk slightly, and since I added the water in this time, I didn't notice any cracks form as it dried, which was great. That was really why I didn't enjoy working with air dry clay in the past. You also get a lot more clay for your money with the DAS. They both cost $11.99, and the paper clay you get 16 ounces, where the DAS comes in 35 ounces, so more than double the amount of clay. After I had all the beads made, I made 32 of them. I'm taking some different objects I have around my craft room to add some detail to the edges. Not on all the beads, but on some of them, since the inspiration had some edge details. So I used this metal ribbon from Dollar Tree to give a beveled look, and then this texture mold that I have to get some variety, and then let the beads dry overnight. Now we can paint, and I wanted to get that natural, earthy look just like the inspiration with the various brown tones. I did not end up using the antique wax or the DIY dark wax. And I'm using a sponge to apply the paint so I can blend some of the colors together easier. I split the beads out into 4 groups of 8 and gave them 1 coat of paint using 4 of the colors: coffee, sandstone, hazelnut, and fawn. Then I took each group and added a 2nd coat of paint, and this time I added in some of the other colors to give the stones dimension and look more earthy. I just played around with the colors until I was happy with the way they were looking. The holes I added were not quite thick enough for my string to fit through, so I took my drill and made them slightly bigger before I could string them up. And I used Dollar Tree black cotton twine and put the beads on randomly so there wasn't a specific pattern. Last, I added a tassel using this leather string, and that's it for this one. I love the way these turned out, and for so much less than $238. Friends, this week I am joining Sammy from Unicorn Dust Designs in her Spotlight series. If you enjoy neutral, everyday home decor, then after this video, head on over to her channel and check out what I made over there. For this project, I'm making a macrame basket and wanted to give it some legs. I had a small piece of 3/4 inch wood dowel laying around and cut it down into 3 pieces that are roughly 2 3/4 inches long. I started out using the miter box, but the legs didn't turn out exactly the same length, and I don't want my basket to be wobbly, so I taped the 3 pieces together and took it out into my garage to use the big saw and make them all the same length. Next, I'm taking the dowel legs and adding them onto a thin wood round I have, which I believe this is from Walmart. I made sure they were evenly spaced and then drew a circle around the legs so I knew where they were supposed to go. I wish I would have made them a little bit closer to the edges instead of an inch in, but that's okay. Next, I'm drilling a pilot hole into the wood round and then into the dowel. I'm going to attach them with wood glue and screws and don't want the wood to split. Now we can start the fun part of making the basket. This was a trial and error process for me, and I made a few mistakes which I will walk you through and tell you how you can get a better result the first time. I found these wired paper floral stems at Walmart. They come in a pack of 6 and they're 18 inches long. I cut 6 of them in half, so I had 12 at 9 inches. I thought this would be enough to create the basket weave, but it turned out it wasn't, so I ended up cutting down another pack of the stems to have 24. To attach the stems to the wood round, I'm using my Star Bond super glue with the accelerator for an instant hold. I spaced the stems out evenly and glued them down. I'm only using the 12 stems at this point before I realized I needed more. After the stems are glued down to the bottom, I flipped the round over and bent them all straight up. Now to make the basket, I'm using 4mm macrame cord. I'm showing you 2 colors here, but only ended up using the white. And I get this from Amazon. It is linked in my description box if you're interested. Here's where I ran into the next issue. I want to create a weave pattern going over under each paper stem. Well, in order to make this work, you need to have an odd number of stems, and I still have the 12 on. So I took them off and re-laid out the stems so there wasn't a large gap in one section and started weaving again. I went several rows up the basket before realizing I needed more stems closer together to get a nicer result that I was looking for, so I took the macrame off and added a stem in between each one currently on the round. However, I still forgot that I needed an odd number and put an even number back on. Oh my gosh, I don't know why I had so much trouble getting this one started when it really is so simple. But this time when I started, I just wrapped the cord around the bottom 4 times and hot glued it down before starting the weave pattern. So by the time I realized I had an even number of stems again, I said, screw it, I am not starting over again, and it just made the wonky section the back. When I got about halfway up the stems, I bent them inward a little bit so that the basket starts to taper in and continued weaving the macrame. And then once I got about halfway up the tapered section, now I bent the stems out but also staggered them. So one is up a little higher and one is bent down a little lower. This is going to create a nice wave at the top of the basket, and I continued weaving until I got closer to the edge of the stems. On the last few rows, I hot glued the macrame to the stems, that way it doesn't come undone. You could stop here and be done, but I wanted to add a little more detail around the edge to finish it with some ribbon. I had a few jute ribbon options from Dollar Tree and picked one that also had the white in it to tie into the basket. And that's it for this one. Even though it gave me so much trouble in the beginning, I love how it looks and it really is so easy to create. I have been looking for a roll top bread box at the thrift store for probably a year and finally found one. It reminds me of my grandmother's house when I was little, and I know this one is not old. It definitely looks newer, but I was still excited to find it. After I cleaned the inside and out, I taped off the inside and the roll top. I'm gonna paint the outside in plaster by Waverly, but want to leave the roll top in the wood tone. I gave the box 3 coats of paint, And then I'm taking 400 grit sandpaper to smooth out any of the brush strokes and sand the edges down a little bit to let the wood come through. I don't like a lot of distressing, but if you do, you can always sand it down even more. I found this beautiful vintage style napkin from Amazon, and I can link it in my description box. I thought it would be perfect on the sides of this bread box. At first, I was only going to use a portion of the napkin in the center of the sides, so I wet a paintbrush and outlined the section I wanted to add. I love this technique because the edges fade right into the object and look like it was always meant to be there. To attach the napkin onto my box, I'm using DIY liquid patina. This is my new favorite decoupage medium. It is a thin consistency and dries quickly. I really enjoy this over Mod Podge, but I started by adding a small section of the patina and then add my napkin and work my way down since it dries quicker. After the middle piece was laid down, I was trying to think how I could make it blend into the rest of the side, and I didn't want this to lean farmhouse. That's not my style, but all I could think of was making the edges dark with antique wax and distressing it. So instead, I ended up taking more pieces of the napkin and filling it in so the entire side was covered, and I'm really glad that I went that direction. When the liquid patina was dry, I took my sandpaper again to the edges to clean them up. The sides felt like there was something missing, so I got out my olive crest mold from IOD, and using this little corner filigree piece, I dusted it with cornstarch and then added in my air dry clay. I made 4 of these pieces to put 2 on the bottom corners of each side. When they dried, I painted them in a light tan color and attached them to the sides using my Starbond super glue. Last for this piece, I wanted to change out the knob and make it feel a little bit more vintage. My mom found this bag of vintage drawer pulls while we were on vacation a few weeks ago that were perfect, so I swapped the wood pull out for a vintage one, and that's it for this one. For this next project, I'm taking a 16 by 20 inch canvas that I had on hand. I'm not sure where I got this one from, and I printed out a mandala design with my Cricut. The size I wanted was too big to fit on one mat, so I did cut it in half, and I also printed this on Dollar Tree contact paper, which is my go-to when I'm cutting out stencils. However, this time it was probably the wrong decision. The contact paper would not stick to the canvas. I tried to glue it down at the beginning with my super glue. That didn't work. So I put a coat of Mod Podge down to see if that would help it stick. Nope. I don't need the stencil to stick well though. I'm only using the outline, so I ended up not worrying about it and just let it stick down as well as it could. I'm making a coffee filter wall art project and picked up 2 different color coffee filters, white and brown. The brown ones will be used for the design and then the white ones to fill in all around it. So to make the filters create a design, you want to fold them into quarters. Fold it in half and then in half again and in half one more time, and I did that for all of the filters. Then to attach them, I'm using hot glue. I started in the top left corner, and the way I attached the white ones was to fold the bottom corner where it formed a triangle, added a dab of hot glue, placed it on the canvas, and then added another dab of hot glue and kind of folded it up onto itself, scrunching it down to stand up. Now they will lean forward a bit, but as you keep going, the previous ones will be held up. When I got to the mandala, like I said, I'm only using the outline. Otherwise, I think this could have looked like a hot mess, but I'm using the brown ones and created a flat bottom on the filters, then glued them down along the rounded edges of the stencil. This was an extremely time-consuming project, and I realized that it was more efficient to fold a stack of filters, which was about 50, and then glue all of those down rather than trying to fold as you go. I also realized the more you packed into a section, the better it looked. So here you can see the beginning where I had started was packed really tight, and the filters create this beautiful wavy design, where on the other side, I don't have as many filters packed in yet, and it just doesn't look as nice. So you really want to pack in as many as you can. Want to take a guess how many filters I used? I'll give you a second to comment down below before I give you the answer. I'm not sure I love how the design turned out. It doesn't look very symmetrical, and I think it would look better without that part to just be a cool textured art piece. I'd love your thoughts though on if you would give something like this a try, and I ended up using about 500 coffee filters. Now head on over to Unicorn Dust Designs and check out the 4 other projects that I created on Sammy's channel, and I'll see you in the next one.